Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for this new edition of Business Africa. On our show today, we focus on agriculture and follow some of the men and women who ensure food security. We'll discuss this with a great specialist of the sector, the Senegalese agro-economist Coumba Dieng, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization representative and country director in Rwanda. But first, let's get on with the show with our top stories today. Cameroonian farmers are taking up the challenge of local rice production to face a growing demand.
Cameroonian rice is not available on the market.
Soilless farming is becoming increasingly popular in Africa, and Côte d'Ivoire is one of the pioneers.
This cultivation technique solves several problems. Firstly, it's accessible to the whole population. It's easy to practice, it solves the soil problem, and it can be practiced anywhere.
Living in cities, but with shared art, that's the promise of street artists in Accra.
It's nice, actually it's nice. And this act will help us to see the young ones that have talent, that they don't have people to support them. So this will show what they have within them.
As you know, the consequences of climate change on agricultural production are felt increasingly and for almost all commodities. Rice is not immune to the phenomenon, with export restrictions from India and fears of drought linked to El Nino in East Asia. Prices are at their highest, and yet, despite this inflation, some African countries like Cameroon are forced to import to meet growing demand. Recently, national producers have sought to build a domestic sector. Abubakar Siddiq Munchili, our correspondent in Yaoundé, went to one of the bastions of rice production in the far north of the country. Take a look. We are here in Yagoua, in the far north of Cameroon, one of the country's rice-producing bastions. Elizabeth Janaba is one of many women and other producers who earn their living here, growing or processing locally produced rice.
Here, we process paddy rice into finished rice. 2 or 3 people work on the machine. We husk the rice and then pack it into 25 and 50 kilogram bags for marketing.
The success achieved by this lady in her activity in the face of ever-increasing local demand and that of Cameroon's neighbouring countries allowed her to create this small processing and packaging unit for this precious cereal.
We joined the rice business to produce for the people of Marua, Chad and Nigeria who come here to collect rice. We often produce 100 bags of 50 kilograms a day.
On the market in this locality, the sale of rice is a very flourishing business. This cereal is one of the most consumed foods in Cameroon, and it is thanks in particular to the SEMRI, the state-owned company for the expansion and modernization of rice growing in Yagoua.
Rice is very important in the town of Yagoua, for the whole family, for the entire population of Yagoua, and more. We live thanks to the SEMRI, to the rice harvest. Even if we eat rice, we don't have any shortages. We have rice every day, every time.
This is not the case in the rest of the country. Even though many made-in-Cameroon brands of rice exist, many other Cameroonians are still looking for locally produced rice. The reason is simple. Distribution obstacles and a need for more knowledge about the product hamper its development. Those who know about this rice and are lucky enough to find it on the market believe its price is simply out of reach for the average person.
Cameroonian rice is not available on the market.
According to the National Statistics Institute, to make up the shortfall in national demand, estimated at over 600,000 tons, the country spent nearly 265 billion CFA francs in 2022 to import just over 841,000 tons of rice. a situation of significant agricultural dependence on the outside world that some consider paradoxical, given the abundance of rain and the availability of arable land not only in Cameroon but also the rest of Africa.
To perform well in a sector, it's not enough to have land and water. You need people to have mastered agricultural technology, for example, for rice. It would help to have rice seeds that are best suited to the areas you want to grow. Communication routes and roads must provide easy access to the product.
Cameroon's efforts to revive the rice sector have been met with limited success in the past. However, a new wave of momentum is sweeping through the sector, propelled by innovative strategies and initiatives. One such initiative is the Rice Value Chain Development Project, a game-changer valued at nearly 123 billion CFA francs. Launched in September 2023 with the backing of the Islamic Development Bank, this project holds immense potential for the future of rice production in Cameroon.
The government really needs to put resources in place to enable the structures involved in rice production to prosper, grow and increase the area under cultivation. We have the production capacity to cover national demand only with these resources.
Several other development partners, including Japan and the International Development Association, are also helping the country to boost the sector. This concessional window of the World Bank has granted Cameroon funding of 116 billion CFA francs to increase agricultural production in the Lagoni Valley in the country's far north.
You can see that today we've talked about self-sufficiency in 2000. Today we can see that Cameroon not only feeds itself but also supplies a number of local markets. The real problem is to be able to produce to our maximum potential. Progress is slow today, but there is still progress in all areas.
Cameroon is determined to satisfy its ever-increasing domestic demand for rice and thus reduce its dependence on external sources. This fine ambition also brings economic hope for the whole continent. The promise of producing more locally, importing less, accumulating more foreign exchange reserves, and ultimately benefiting from genuine monetary stability. Meanwhile, in Zimbabwe, the devastation caused by drought is very severe. Authorities estimate that 77% of the country's corn production is destroyed and that nearly 8 million people will need immediate food aid until next year. To discuss the close links between food shortages and socio-political unrest, but also the means to increase production, our journalist Alexandra Vepierre met in Kigali the Senegalese agro-economist Coumba Dieng, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization representative and country director in Rwanda. Take a look.
Bonjour Coumba.
Coumba Dieng, hello. Coup d'etat in Gabon, Niger, Burkina Faso, armed conflicts in Sudan or the east of the DRC. What impact do political crises and conflicts have on food security?
Conflicts and wars obviously threaten food security in the world. This is one of the main causes of food insecurity across the globe. There are areas where severe, even acute food insecurity has been apparent for some years, even decades. We can talk about the Sahel, the Liptako-Gurma countries, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, but also the northeast of Nigeria, which for several years now has been in a conflict that shows that we have a situation of food insecurity that is steadily increasing. The link between food insecurity and conflict is something that the FAO has been working on for several years. Since 2015, we have been authorized by the United Nations Security Council to hold a session every 6 months. The last session just finished a few days ago, and we can now present the results on food insecurity. I mean, the data we have extracted from our analysis of the various countries in crisis. So we should not oversimplify by saying that because of conflict, there is food insecurity. However, we need to be aware that food insecurity can trigger conflicts. We have seen several of them, such as the hunger riots in 2008. For example, we saw the Arab Spring, which began with the price of bread. So these links are being carefully examined, and we monitor these debates daily to provide the correct responses for the populations that are the most affected and the most vulnerable.
To improve yields, how much should be reserved for agroecology and how much for improved seeds? Can the two coexist in Africa?
Agroecology and biotechnology can obviously go hand in hand. There is no conflict between the two. The most important thing today is to realize that nearly 800 million people in the world are hungry. And these 800 million people are hungry because of the effects of climate change and the conflicts we have just been talking about. But how can the impact of climate change be mitigated? How can producers adapt? There are two ways. There are the agroecological means, which are ancestral formulas that people have always used to adapt. And then there's what's known as improved seeds, which are sometimes used because the rains are becoming irregular due to climate change or because the rainy seasons are getting shorter. We can have varieties that allow us to produce much faster without impacting the environment or human health. The FAO's role is to ensure that when we talk about improved seeds and biotechnologies, we are always in phase with respect for the environment and human health, because human health goes hand in hand with food safety.
The connection between food security and water is now more crucial than ever. 2018, you were involved in the significant FAO initiative, the 1 million tanks for the Sahel. What is the initial assessment of this impactful initiative?
So the Sahel remains one of the most vulnerable regions in the world, and its vulnerability also stems from climate change and water scarcity. That's why we created the 1 million tanks for the Sahel program. And by the end of the first year, we had already reached 20,000 women with direct access to water. For us, it's important to continue this type of program. It's not the only one. There are others like Savadogo, who in Burkina Faso accelerated the use of an ancestral technique called Dieng, which retains water for agricultural production. We're promoting several techniques and practices that enable water to be conserved and collected in the first place. That's the first thing, to preserve it and then to be able to reuse it for drinking, because women travel dozens of kilometers to find water, bring it back, take it home, and for cooking. So with these programs, we are ensuring that women's work hardships are reduced. They have water for drinking and cooking, but they also have a surplus that they can use to produce. We've been to regions of the Sahel where agricultural production was zero, precisely because there was no water. Whenever there was water, it was for direct consumption. But thanks to the project 1 million tanks for the Sahel, women have been able to start gardening to produce vegetables that children can eat, thereby improving their nutrition.
Et améliorer ainsi leur nutrition.
This was Coumba Dieng, Senegalese agro-economist and the FAO representative and country director in Rwanda. Let's now turn to Nairobi, where the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit was held at the beginning of the month. About 65% of African agricultural land is degraded due to low fertilizer use, soil erosion and desertification. During the summit, 54 countries signed the Nairobi Declaration, which aims at changing this by encouraging more investment in local production of fertilizers and by leveraging AfCFTA, the African Free Trade Area, for more intercontinental trade. Specifically, domestic production of fertilizers should triple by 2034. Across Africa, a new form of agriculture is gaining ground: soilless farming. The principle is quite simple: grow crops using residues from agriculture, the agro-industry, and even rubbish bins and landfill sites. This solution is proving popular in several countries as a response to land scarcity, soil erosion, and deforestation. A case in point is Côte d'Ivoire, where a group of enthusiasts have taken up the subject of soilless planting and adapted it to the production of Big Sun, the famous sweet-smelling pepper. A report by Ma Kamara at Grand Bassin. On today's menu, Sumbara leaf sauce, a famous hot sauce made from spinach leaves and manioc. This chili pepper is known as Big Sun, or le piment sans bon in French, the sweet-smelling chili. Famous for its spicy aroma and flavor, the sweet-smelling chili is still a bestseller in Côte d'Ivoire. This is the sweet-smelling chili. In Côte d'Ivoire, you can't cook without a nice-smelling chili sauce, and it's used to spice up the food and give flavor to the sauce. The chili pepper, with this nice smell, almost everyone in Côte d'Ivoire uses it, despite its high price and the fact that it is hard to get in the market. This is the yellow chili, it's not the same. This is the one that smells good. It's mixed, you can see it. This is the real one, the sweet-smelling chili. You see, it's tiny, like this. It's when there's a shortage that the price goes up. There are buckets sold at 8,000, 10,000, other buckets at 12,000 PFA francs. Often, the price of a bucket goes up to 15,000 to 20,000, depending on the period. As the price of raw material goes up, so does the price of the bucket. So how can we make this much sought-after ingredient available to everyone at a lower cost?
Côte d'Ivoire first prison.
Turning this colonial prison into an agricultural farm is the vocation of these teachers in the seaside town of Grand Bassin. Peppers planted in sacks, here the fruit grows out of the ground. The aim is to disseminate this technique in order to achieve self-sufficiency in food crops in Côte d'Ivoire, mainly the sweet-smelling chilies. The initiator of this technique is Justin Keith. He explains the motivation behind his eco-responsible growing system, which uses materials salvaged from the city's rubbish bins and landfill sites. There's no need for fertile soil here. The benefits are plenty. The farmer doesn't have to crouch down, the fruit doesn't rot in contact with the soil, and finally, water savings.
This cultivation technique solves several problems. Firstly, it's accessible to the whole population. It's easy to practice, it solves the soil problem, and it can be practiced anywhere on flagstone, as long as there's a space where you can put the pots, bags and sacks.
By dint of promotion, Justin managed to convince several people, including this retired teacher. He is now one of Justin's companions in popularizing this form of agriculture. Various vegetables such as eggplants, onions and tomatoes will be grown in these greenhouses, a practice that can be adapted to all staple crops.
We grow this crop because we see a lot of advantages. A lot of benefits. First of all, it's entrepreneurship for young people and even for the population as a whole, especially women, because it's market gardening that we generally do. And we also have the upside of providing local people with organic products, which can help improve their health. And at a lower cost, because we use recycled materials that are less expensive for us. We also have a big mission to supply the canteens with products, since we are the teachers, and that the canteens are becoming more and more permanent with the withdrawal of the World Food Programme. We feel that the canteens could be well provided for thanks to this project.
The fertilizer is compost made from dead leaves and food scraps buried in the soil for several weeks. Between 5 and 7 tons of fruit and vegetables are expected. to come out of these bags yearly and distributed through a local network. Welcome back to the second part of our show. $2.2 billion in financing to promote clean cooking in Africa. This is the result of a key Paris conference held earlier this month. 3/4 of the African population, or more than 900 million people, rely on open fires and stoves that burn charcoal and wood to cook meals, which leads to respiratory diseases and even deadly accidents. Nations and companies such as Vitol have pledged money, as well as the European Union and the African Development Bank. The International Energy Agency that convened the conference said that it will keep track of how these pledges turn to concrete solutions. And meanwhile, 42 million voters are heading for the polls this week in South Africa. This is a crucial time for the Rainbow Nation, as opinion polls ahead of the May 29th elections see the ANC, the party of Nelson Mandela, falling short of the 50% needed to form a government by itself. The likely prospect of a coalition government unsettles investors who fear extreme policies from the left-wing parties, such as nationalizing banks, mines and telecom companies. The country has a jobless rate above 32%, but the recent boom in platinum and gold prices should benefit the economy. More than 1.3 billion Africans will live in cities by 2050, tripling the continent's urban population in 35 years. It is a social revolution in prospect, with the emergence of the middle and upper class in search of a better family environment. Already, metropolises on the continent are smoothly adjusting to new aspirations. Example in Accra, where a whole tradition of mural art, street art, has developed to support the evolution of the city. This is a report by our correspondent in Accra, John Owotwi. The city of Accra, bustling with activity, is notorious for its persistent traffic jams. The cosmopolitan nature of this West African city means that it is constantly going through transformations. One such welcome transformation is the City Murals project, through which local artists are collaborating to beautify the bustling streets of Accra with vibrant murals of rich cultural and historical significance. Today, renowned painters of Ghana are putting expressive art into public spaces, using the concrete facades of the various overpasses around Accra as their canvas. One such overpass is the Akko-Ajay interchange along the principal road leading to Accra Central, which also crosses the Nkrumah Circle on the Ring Road to the coastal part of Accra. The paintings center on traditional culture and historical portraits. One such portrait is that of Ebezina Akko-Ajay, a former Minister of Justice, statesman, politician, lawyer, journalist, and founding member of the United Gold Coast Convention, the first political party of Ghana.
The murals you see as part of the urban design work to beautify the city, instead of having posters sometimes defacing most of under the bridges and concrete works in town. Rather, we should have paintings that serve as part of the beautification of the city. So it's part of the city works. In fact, we call it public art, and the public art could be mural, like the paintings you see, can be sculptures like Dr. Buzier's sculpture 37, or Kintakiteria sculpture around the Rawlins Park area.
People who cross the area are amazed by the freshness that these vibrant artwork bring to these public spaces.
It's nice, actually it's nice. And this act will help us to see the young ones that have talent that they don't have people to support them. So this will show what they have within them. Maybe some of them have finished university and they don't have job, but exhibiting this talent around will just help us to know that this person has this type of talent so that we can just help the person out to expose it out, big one.
This one is a storytelling. You can tell a lot of stories. For at least our fathers and our grandfathers can tell us more about this because we are young guys now before we are coming. So we can't tell more stories about it unless we went and asked them. Then they can tell us more stories about it. Because every artwork of this is a meaning of it. So it's very beautiful.
I personally will encourage the government to build a much more bigger museum whereby art could be displayed. By doing so, we are promoting the artistic industry. Each time I come here with my girls, actually they go to school here. Anytime I pick them from school, when I get here, I see the beauty of the art, very impressive.
The artists have also done some work at the Tete Kwashi interchange to replace the concrete walls at the Tete Kwashi overpass, which had previously been defaced with worn-out posters and other advertising material. Today, it boasts magnificent murals paying homage to female heroes such as the first female doctor Susan Ofroy-Atta, industrialist Esther Oklu, female lawyer Annie Jage, Ya Asantewa, woman warrior to fight the British, among others.
Accra is growing very fast. So everybody that is in Ghana thinks that when you come to Accra, you'll make it. So the city is expanding faster than we, the planners, can sit down and lay out the city. If the city is laid out properly, then we can have hold on where we should put our murals and sculptures and all those things. But, planning is always chasing development.
In Accra, traffic jams may just be an opportunity to take in these murals, which represent a memorial to the legacies of some of the most influential and remarkable figures of Ghanaian history. Well, that's it for today. Business Africa is over. I'll see you next week, same time, same channel, for a new episode of Initiative Africa. We'll host the Congolese designer Nukresh Puna. In the meantime, you can watch this show again on our website, africania.com, and follow us on our social media channels. Feel free to share, like, and comment using the hashtag Business Africa. Have a great week, and until next time, goodbye.